I am Elizabeth Betty Garba Nichtun Fliegel. I was born to Oscar Nichtun and Cora Tobak, and I was born somewhere around Aladna, the village of Aladna. They didn't tell me the location, so in July 20, 1935, I was growing up. Okay, I grew up after my mother died in 1942. I was about 7 years old, and we used to go to camps, spring camp. I remember one time I was real young, she was still alive, and they left me with my younger brother and sister, Oscar Nichtun Jr. and Stella. And I was alone in the camp with him. My brother wanted a little wooden boat, so I remember making it for him, putting a nail. I was just a little girl, but I had to do that stuff. And we're just connected to the land. All the years we're being raised because that was our river of life and game. We got connected to the land because we had a village house, but then we hardly lived there because we're always running to camp, either spring camp, summer camp, and then fall camp. We stay there all summer to the fall time, where we get to put away all our fish, berries, and the guys go hunting. In them days, we had to preserve our meat a different way. If the hunting was later, we can take the fresh meat home, but most time we had to jerk it and dry it. But then we moved around so much because we had everybody had their own camping areas, the families. Sometimes we camp together, about 3-4 families, and we become one big family, have our evening meal together. So, but in the winter time, Dad had 3 cabins. One was at Burrow Rock, one was in Blackjack, and one was in Searock. All that was his trap line and hunting grounds. So that's our connection to the land. That was our food and our clothing and our income comes of the land. Nobody had jobs yet until he got a riverboat job. We were taught not to leave any garbage, and also the spirituality. Every camp we go to now, we can feel the presence, the presence of where we've been. I mean, that used to have been, because I didn't go back until 1958 when I got married, and I went back to those places again. The spirituality, as my childhood growing up in those camps, my sister took me there in 1958 summer, and I got really connected back. It was just so peaceful and very wonderful feeling. When we were children, like I said, I remember going to kindergarten when I was probably around 5. There were 3 of us in kindergarten. We only had few books in the school, and we only had 1 tablet we had to share, and our stub of pencil was about that big, and we didn't have very much paper as we were growing up. Not writing paper or any kind of paper that you can just throw away now. Now we throw away tons. But then that used to subscribe to the Life magazine, National Geographic, and Saturday Evening Post. and few comic books. My sisters had the true story and stuff like that. And that was our reading material after we got older. But when we were learning as children, the ABCs and stuff, because we're always in camp, hardly going to school, we had to keep learning. And like homeschool, I guess. We sit there as little children, just learn our ABCs and spelling, and trying to write it down by reading on the coffee cans and flour sugar sacks and stuff. It was very exciting. I didn't understand what was going on. But then I heard about if we claim lands, we wouldn't lose all our land to the federal government or the state. I had already claimed my 5 acres, so. But then when it came around, I couldn't decide. One of my nephews, Ronald Sam, was on the committee that was doing the choosing for, he wasn't choosing for somebody, he was recording where they're going to claim, so he tried to talk me into claiming land around the Alatna area. And I said, no, my marriage is mixed and my children are growing up in Manly Hot Springs, so I made a big decision to keep them where they were growing up and claim land at Manly Hot Springs instead. And, you know, we were so small, I said, I might as well, since I live here and raise my kids here, I might as well just provide them with more people so we can really get it. Remember, there were only 40-some of us original. You can believe that. I've never seen so many copies. Every time you have to do something, you gotta make so many copies. And that's a lot of writing. We didn't have a computer in them days or anything like that. Everything had to be handwritten. I never thought too much about it, but I was wondering, you know, what a waste. Even today, I still try to use a blank paper on my stuff to jot down things. That's how we were raised. We had to conserve everything we had. I was one of the committee that planned getting it going. We had to record everything. That was sad. And since I had a little experience taking notes from my school and down my dad's we had our own committee. So they always jotted me down as secretary, so I couldn't spell it very good, but I done it. And then had to rewrite the notes after if I misspell. It was so hard, like we just mentioned earlier, couldn't keep the village corporation. I thought they were all one at first, Bean Ridge Corporation, the village corporation, and until we start talking about the 7I and how much, and boy, I was so afraid they wanted my land. They wanted my land so bad, that 5 acres, they wanted to add it onto the village council land, and I fought tooth and nail for that, and I still have it. I went back to the state and reclaimed it. But I was not too involved in the village council, but I was kind of involved in the Bean Ridge when it first started, and I was off and on until I had a full-time job, and I always had to take annual leave unless it's Saturday to do the meeting.